I'm Morgan Hayes, 28, and I've built a restaurant empire from nothing but determination and a secondhand cookbook. Last month, my boyfriend's wealthy friends reduced me to the poor girl over an 8-course meal at Lumiere, Chicago's most exclusive restaurant. Their smirks vanished instantly when the waiter approached our table and said, "Welcome back, Ms. Hayes. The staff is honored to have the owner of Hayes Restaurant Group dining with us tonight. Before I tell you how I turned their sneers into shock, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt judged for where you came from." Growing up in Southside Chicago meant understanding what struggle looked like before I could even spell the word. My mother, Dana, worked 3 jobs: waitressing mornings at a diner, administrative work afternoons, and bartending weekends. She'd come home with swollen feet and a tired smile, always making sure I had everything I needed even when she went without. Our apartment was small but impeccably clean, with mismatched furniture collected over years of yard sales and discount stores. My love for food began in my grandmother Sophie's tiny kitchen. While Mom worked, Grandma Sophie taught me to transform simple ingredients into meals that made people close their eyes in pleasure when they took the first bite. "Cooking is love made visible," she'd say, guiding my small hands to knead dough or stir sauces. By 12, I could make a roast chicken that neighbors would offer to pay for. When Grandma Sophie passed away my freshman year of high school, she left me her handwritten recipe book and her ancient cast-iron skillet. That book became my Bible, and that skillet, my most prized possession. I promised myself I'd make her proud. College wasn't something people from my neighborhood typically pursued, but I was determined. I won a partial scholarship to the University of Illinois for their hospitality management program, but it barely covered half the costs. The solution was working. A lot. I juggled classes during the day while working evenings and weekends at restaurants across Chicago. From dishwasher to line cook to server, I learned every aspect of the restaurant business from the ground up. My junior year, I landed a coveted internship at Mezzanotte, working under Chef Antonio Rossi. The hours were brutal, the pay was minimal, but the education was priceless. Chef Rossi was exacting, sometimes terrifying, but he recognized my passion. "You have the hands and heart of a chef, but the mind of a businesswoman," he told me one night after service. "That combination is rare and valuable. Don't waste it." After graduation, I continued working at Mezzanotte while saving every penny. My dream of opening my own place seemed impossible when looking at Chicago's real estate prices, but I stayed focused. I started small, a catering business run from a rented commercial kitchen, specializing in elevated comfort food with my grandmother's recipes as the foundation. Word spread, clients multiplied, and within 2 years, I had enough for a down payment on a small storefront in an up-and-coming neighborhood. Hayes Kitchen opened with just 8 tables and a menu that changed daily based on what was fresh and affordable. The first 3 months were terrifying. Empty seats, sleepless, nights calculating expenses, and the constant fear of failure. Then a local food blogger came in, wrote a glowing review, and suddenly we had lines out the door. The rest happened faster than I could have imagined. A second location, then a third. Features in local magazines, a spot on a regional cooking show. I met James Whitford at a charity gala where my company was catering. Tall, with perfect teeth and a Rolex that probably cost more than my first car. He wasn't the type of man who usually noticed me. I was busy arranging a display of petit fours when he approached, asking about the delicate lavender flavor in the icing. Our conversation about French pastry techniques lasted an hour. When he asked for my number, I almost looked over my shoulder to see if he was talking to someone else. Our first date was at a hidden jazz club where the pianist knew him by name. James was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in my journey. "Most people I know were handed everything," he confessed over drinks. "I admire how you've built something from nothing." When he kissed me goodnight, it felt like the beginning of something significant. The following weeks were a whirlwind of thoughtful texts, surprise lunch deliveries to my restaurant, and dates that always included something memorable. a private viewing at an art gallery, tickets to a sold-out show, a helicopter ride over the city at sunset. James moved through the world with an ease I'd never known, doors opening effortlessly wherever he went. What impressed me most was how he treated service staff, always polite, generous with tips, remembering names. This wasn't someone who looked down on people who worked with their hands. Or so I thought. 6 months into our relationship, James mentioned a dinner with his college friends. "They're dying to meet you," he said, scrolling through his calendar. "We do this quarterly. Dinner thing at different restaurants. It's Bradley's turn to choose, so it'll be somewhere ridiculously expensive." He laughed, squeezing my hand. "Don't worry, they'll love you." The dinner was scheduled at Lumiere, a French restaurant with 3 Michelin stars and a 6-month waiting list. I'd never been, couldn't afford it, but knew its reputation well. The head chef had revolutionized molecular gastronomy in the Midwest, and the sommelier was legendary. I spent an entire day's profits on a black cocktail dress from a boutique James had casually mentioned liking. It was simple but elegant, the most expensive piece of clothing I'd ever owned. I justified the purchase as an investment. First impressions matter, especially with people James described as practically family. The night before the dinner, I couldn't sleep, rehearsing conversations and researching wine regions so I wouldn't sound ignorant. James noticed my nervousness as he picked me up, kissing my forehead gently. "You look gorgeous, and you're the most interesting person they'll meet all year. Just be yourself." I believed him. I believed in us. I had no idea how quickly that faith would shatter. Lumiere occupied the entire top floor of a historic building downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Chicago's glittering skyline. The elevator opened directly into the restaurant, where a hostess in a perfectly tailored suit greeted James by name. The interior was understated luxury. No flashy decorations, just impeccable materials. Hand-carved wooden tables, Italian leather chairs, custom lighting that made everyone look airbrushed. I felt out of place immediately. My carefully chosen dress suddenly seemed off-the-rack obvious among women dripping in designer labels and subtle diamonds. I touched my grandmother's small pearl necklace for reassurance as we approached the table. James's friends had already arrived. Bradley Norton, an investment banker with slicked-back hair and a perpetual smirk, sat with his wife Cassandra, who had the polished look of someone who considered personal maintenance a full-time job. Thomas Kensington, James's former roommate and current law partner, had brought a date named Victoria, a willowy blonde who barely looked up from her phone as we approached. "The man of the hour!" Bradley stood, clapping James on the shoulder before turning to me with a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "And this must be the chef we've heard so much about." Not Morgan, not James's girlfriend. The chef. Already categorized by my occupation rather than my relationship to James. Cassandra air-kissed my cheeks, her perfume expensive and overwhelming. "That's a lovely dress. Banana Republic has really stepped up their game this season." My dress wasn't from Banana Republic, but the implication was clear. She had instantly identified it as a lower-tier brand. James, who should have noticed my discomfort, was already deep in conversation with Thomas about their recent golf trip. The sommelier approached with a wine list the size of a small novel. Bradley ordered without consulting anyone, a bottle of Chateau Margaux that I recognized as costing more than my monthly rent. When the sommelier presented the bottle to the table, Bradley gestured for me to give my approval. "Since we have a culinary expert with us," he said with a thin smile, "perhaps Morgan should confirm our selection." I knew enough about wine to get by in my restaurants, but this was a deliberate test. I examined the bottle, noting the year and region, and nodded my approval. The sommelier poured a small amount for me to taste. "Lovely structure," I said after tasting, using terminology I knew was appropriate but not overly technical. "Great choice," Victoria snickered behind her napkin. Structure, that's cute. James squeezed my knee under the table, but didn't defend me. Instead, he quickly changed the subject to Bradley's new summer home. Morgan's never been to the Hamptons, James volunteered, as if offering an amusing fact. She's been so focused on her business she barely takes vacations. People who don't summer in the Hamptons, Bradley mused, swirling his wine, are a fascinating demographic. So dedicated to work. Admirable, really. Where do your parents vacation? Cassandra asked me directly. My mother usually visits her sister in Michigan for a week each August, I answered honestly. She loves the lake. How quaint, Victoria murmured, exchanging glances with Cassandra. The conversation shifted to boarding schools and mutual acquaintances from their university days. I sat quietly, increasingly aware of the social gulf between us. James, who normally included me in conversations, seemed to have forgotten I was there, laughing at inside jokes and reminiscing about events I hadn't been part of. When I tried to join the conversation about a recent art exhibition I'd attended, Thomas cut me off mid-sentence to tell a story about meeting the artist at a private showing. I felt myself shrinking, taking smaller sips of wine, becoming the background character in a scene where I'd hoped to be welcomed. By the time our appetizers arrived, tiny architectural creations of rare ingredients, I was fighting to maintain my smile. James had transformed before my eyes, adopting the same casually dismissive tone as his friends, laughing a little too loudly at jokes that punched down. Morgan's mother worked 3 jobs when she was growing up, James announced suddenly during a lull in conversation. Can you imagine? 3 jobs. I don't think my father worked that hard in his entire life, and he's worth 8 figures. He laughed, and they laughed with him, while my childhood struggles became cocktail entertainment. I felt the first crack in my heart, wondering if this was how he spoke about me when I wasn't present. I excused myself to find the restroom, needing a moment to compose myself. As I walked away, I heard Victoria's stage whisper, "Is this a charity project, James? Or is the food at her little diner really that good?" Their laughter followed me down the hallway. When I returned to the table, the conversation had shifted to careers and family backgrounds, an innocuous topic for most social gatherings, but with this group, it felt like entering a minefield blindfolded. Morgan was just telling us about her mother's various jobs, Cassandra said, her smile tight. And what did your father do? Was he also in service? The pause before service carried a weight of condescension that made my skin crawl. My father wasn't in the picture, I replied evenly, but my grandmother helped raise me. She taught me to cook, actually. Oh, so cooking is like a family tradition? Victoria asked, eyebrows raised. That's actually sweet. Most people in hospitality sort of fall into it because they couldn't do anything else. I felt my professional pride bristle. Actually, I have a degree in hospitality management and business. I worked my way through college in some of Chicago's top restaurants. Bradley chuckled. You mean you actually paid for your own education? James, where did you find this rare specimen? Most people we know are still having daddy pay off their student loans while complaining about capitalism on Instagram. The table erupted in laughter that felt like tiny daggers. Even James joined in, shaking his head as if my work ethic was some charming oddity rather than necessity. Morgan owns a small catering business, James explained, dramatically understating my company's scope. She's very hands-on. When you say catering, Cassandra leaned forward, do you mean like for office parties and such? I'm on the board for the Children's Hospital fundraiser. We might need someone for the staff appreciation lunch. I'm sure we could find room in the budget for something simple. The condescension was unbearable. My company had catered events for the mayor's office and multiple celebrity clients. Last month, we'd handled a wedding for a famous NBA player that had been featured in a national magazine. But here I was, being offered a pity job for a staff lunch. That's very kind, I managed, but we're actually booked solid for the next 8 months. A small victory, but it felt hollow when James remained silent beside me. The waiter arrived to take our main course orders. Bradley ordered the most expensive item on the menu, aged Wagyu beef with black truffle, without glancing at the price. Everyone followed suit with similarly extravagant choices. When it was my turn, I selected a relatively modest fish dish. "You can order whatever you want," James whispered, loud enough for others to hear. "Don't worry about the price." Heat rushed to my face. I hadn't chosen the fish to save money. I genuinely wanted it. But now it appeared I was trying to be economical. Before I could clarify, Thomas jumped in. "Financial literacy among the lower classes is actually impressive," he said, as if offering a scholarly observation. "My foundation works with underprivileged communities, and the budgeting skills some of these people develop are remarkable. Necessity is the mother of invention, right? These people. As if I were a specimen from another world, rather than someone sitting at their table." As the conversation continued, I found myself mentally revisiting the journey that had brought me here. The nights I'd slept on a cot in my first restaurant's office because I couldn't afford both rent and payroll. The time I'd burned my hands badly but worked through the pain because I couldn't afford to hire a replacement chef. The investors who'd laughed me out of their offices before I'd proven myself. All the sacrifices and hardships that had built my success, reduced to poverty tourism for James's privileged friends. When the sommelier returned to recommend wine pairings for our entrees, Bradley waved him over to James. "Let's defer to Morgan's boyfriend. She's probably more familiar with the house wine selection at TGI Fridays." Cassandra's tinkling laugh couldn't disguise the cruelty of the comment. Thomas snorted into his napkin, and Victoria didn't even try to hide her amusement. James, rather than defending me, simply looked embarrassed, not by his friend's behavior, but by my presence. I excused myself again, this time barely keeping my composure until I reached the restroom. Locking myself in a stall, I pressed my hands against my eyes, refusing to cry and ruin my makeup. The bathroom door opened, and I recognized Cassandra's and Victoria's voices. "She seems nice enough," Victoria was saying, but completely out of her depth. "Did you see that Target pearl necklace? And those shoes are at least 2 seasons old." "James always had a saving people thing," Cassandra replied, her voice echoing off the marble. "Remember that scholarship girl from junior year? At least this one has a business, however modest. I just don't understand what he sees in her beyond the novelty." "Maybe she's really good in bed," Victoria suggested with a cruel laugh. "Why else would he parade her around like this? It's honestly embarrassing." "Bradley says she'll be gone by Christmas. James's mother is already introducing him to the Saunders girl. Her father owns half of downtown." Their voices faded as they left, unaware I'd heard every word. I emerged from the stall, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me seemed unfamiliar, uncertain, diminished, her confidence in tatters. This wasn't me. This wasn't the Morgan Hayes who had built something from nothing, who had overcome every obstacle thrown in her path. When I returned to the table, our main courses had arrived. James leaned over. "Are you okay? You're being so quiet. You're embarrassing me." Not, "Are they embarrassing you?" but, "You're embarrassing me." In that moment, something inside me hardened. The hurt was still there, but beneath it, anger began to simmer. Not just at his friends, but at James himself. The elaborate main courses sat before us like edible art installations, steam rising from plates that probably cost more than what some of my employees made in a day. I pushed the food around, my appetite long gone, as Bradley regaled the table, with stories from their recent guy's trip to Cabo, a trip James had never mentioned to me. "The yacht was ridiculous," Bradley was saying, sipping his third glass of wine. 38 feet, crew of 5, and the chef was from that place in Monaco. What's it called? The one with all the stars. Le Ciel, I supplied automatically, recognizing the reference to the famous restaurant. The table fell silent, everyone staring as if I'd spoken out of turn. Well, Bradley recovered with a smirk. Looks like someone's been reading her food magazines. James laughed too loudly. Morgan loves watching those cooking shows. She can name all the celebrity chefs. The way he said it made my knowledge sound like a parlor trick rather than professional expertise. I felt something vital slipping away, not just my dignity, but my very sense of self. The waiter appeared to clear our plates and inquire about dessert. An older man with dignified gray at his temples, he moved with the practiced grace of someone who had mastered the art of being present without being intrusive. "Shall I bring the dessert menus?" he asked. Bradley winked conspiratorially. "Maybe bring us the dessert menu and a separate, more budget-friendly menu for our friend. Morgan here." He gestured toward me with his wine glass, sloshing a few drops onto the immaculate tablecloth. The table erupted in laughter. Even James chuckled, though he had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. "Perhaps something from the children's menu?" Thomas suggested, building on Bradley's joke. "Something with rainbow sprinkles?" Victoria covered her mouth in exaggerated shock. "Don't be mean. I'm sure there are very sophisticated desserts at... What's your restaurant called again, Morgan? Hayes Diner?" "Actually," Cassandra interjected, "I think it's a food truck, isn't it? James mentioned something about street food." I gripped my napkin under the table, knuckles white, a hurricane of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. I'd faced criticism, rejection, and doubt throughout my career, but never this kind of deliberate, sustained humiliation. James leaned forward, apparently deciding to join the fun. "You guys should have seen Morgan the first time I took her to a real restaurant. She didn't know what caviar was." He turned to me with what he probably thought was affectionate teasing. "Remember? You thought it was some kind of exotic jam." It wasn't true. I knew perfectly well what caviar was, had worked with it many times. But James was rewriting history to fit the narrative his friends found amusing. Morgan, the unsophisticated charity case. As laughter rippled around the table, I faced a moment of truth. I could laugh along, shrinking myself to fit their expectations. I could excuse myself and never see any of them again. Or I could stand up for myself and likely end my relationship, with James in the process. Before I could decide, the older waiter returned, not with dessert menus, but with a younger server in tow. The older man's eyes widened slightly as he looked at me more carefully. "Ms. Hayes," he said, his professional demeanor giving way to genuine surprise. "Morgan Hayes? I didn't recognize you at first." The table fell silent. "Yes?" I responded, confusion momentarily replacing my hurt. He smiled broadly. "Welcome back. It's an honor to have the owner of Hayes Restaurant Group dining with us tonight. I served you last year when you came in with Chef Rossi to discuss your collaboration." I remembered now. Antonio had brought me here to celebrate after I'd been named one of Food and Wine's chefs to watch. We'd sat at the chef's table, talking shop with Lumiere's executive chef until the early hours. "Robert," I said, recalling the waiter's name. "Of course. How are you?" Bradley and Thomas exchanged confused glances. Victoria's perfectly shaped eyebrows had disappeared beneath her bangs. Cassandra's smile had frozen in place. Robert beamed. "Very well. Thank you for asking. The executive chef wanted me to inquire if you'd be willing to visit the kitchen after your meal. He's implemented several of the innovations you discussed at the Culinary Institute Symposium last month and would love your feedback." James was staring at me as if seeing a stranger. "Kitchen innovations?" he echoed weakly. The younger server beside Robert nodded enthusiastically. Ms. Hayes's keynote speech on sustainable kitchen practices was amazing. "We've adopted her zero-waste program here. It's reduced our costs by 18%. Time seemed to stand still as understanding dawned around the table. This wasn't Morgan the charity case, Morgan the simple caterer, Morgan the unsophisticated, girlfriend. This was Morgan Hayes, owner of a successful restaurant group, respected industry innovator, and apparently someone the staff at one of Chicago's most prestigious restaurants held in high professional regard. Robert turned to our table with the practiced smile of a veteran server. "Will there be anything else before dessert? Chef has asked to prepare something special for Ms. Hayes's table with his compliments." 5 pairs of eyes turned to me, awaiting my response. In that crystalline moment, with my past and present colliding so unexpectedly, I felt the power dynamic shift like tectonic plates beneath our table. I met Robert's kind eyes and smiled. "Please tell Chef Martinez I'd be delighted to see his kitchen. And yes, we'd love to try his dessert selection. His coconut lime soufflé was revolutionary when I had it last." "Of course, Ms. Hayes," Robert replied with a respectful nod before departing. The silence at our table was deafening. I took a sip of water, allowing the moment to breathe before addressing the wide-eyed stares around me. "You own Hayes Restaurant Group?" Thomas finally asked, his voice higher than usual. "The Hayes Restaurant Group? With locations in Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles?" 5 locations now, I corrected gently. "We opened in Seattle and Austin last quarter." Bradley cleared his throat. I actually had dinner at your Chicago location last month. The truffle risotto was exceptional." "Thank you," I said. "That's my grandmother's recipe, actually. The one who taught me to cook." Cassandra's perfectly manicured hand fluttered to her throat. "But James said you had a small catering company." I turned to James, whose face had drained of color. "That's how we started 7 years ago. The catering business still operates, for select clients." I kept my voice even, though my heart was racing. "We did the governor's holiday reception last year." "I think I read about you," Victoria interjected suddenly. "Weren't you in Food and Wine recently? Something about innovative female chefs?" "Rising Star Chef Award last spring," I confirmed. "And a feature on our sustainability initiatives in Bon Appetit this month." James reached for my hand under the table, but I subtly shifted away. His touch felt foreign now, tainted by betrayal. "Morgan is very modest about her success," James attempted, his voice strained with forced casualness. "I wanted you all to get to know the real her, not just her professional accomplishments." The transparent lie hung in the air. Thomas and Bradley exchanged skeptical glances. "So the symposium Robert mentioned," Bradley began. "At the Culinary Institute of America," I supplied. "I was invited to give the keynote on sustainable kitchen practices. We've reduced food waste across all our restaurants by nearly 40% while improving profitability. Several major restaurant groups have adopted our model." Thomas leaned forward, his earlier condescension replaced with naked opportunism. "My investment group is actually looking at culinary ventures right now. Perhaps we could set up a meeting next week. I'd love to hear about your expansion plans." "I've always been a huge supporter of female entrepreneurs," Cassandra added quickly. "The hospital board is planning a major fundraiser in the fall. We'd be honored if you'd consider being our featured chef." The swift transformation from mockery to networking was almost dizzying. Victoria was already scrolling through her phone, presumably checking my credentials or looking for my social media presence. Bradley was signaling for the sommelier, likely to order an even more expensive bottle. Before anyone could continue their sudden charm offensive, Robert returned with another man, distinguished in his 50s, wearing a pristine white chef's jacket with "Executive Chef" embroidered on the breast. "Morgan Hayes," the man greeted me warmly. "Miguel Martinez. We met briefly last year. Your speech at the symposium was revolutionary. Exactly what the industry needs." I stood to shake his hand. "Chef Martinez, your reputation precedes you. Your work with indigenous ingredients has influenced many of our seasonal menus." He beamed at the recognition. "I've taken the liberty of preparing a special dessert tasting for your table. And I insist, dinner is on the house tonight. Professional courtesy." James nearly choked on his water. That's extremely generous, but we insist, Chef Martinez said firmly. Ms. Hayes's contributions to culinary sustainability have benefited all of us in the Chicago restaurant community. It's the least we can do. As they departed, promising dessert momentarily, I felt a strange sense of calm descend. The validation wasn't what mattered. I knew my worth long before walking into Lumiere tonight. What mattered was the stark revelation of how James truly saw me, how easily he'd allowed me to be diminished for his friend's entertainment. The dessert arrived, a stunning array of miniature creations that showcased both technical mastery and artistic vision. As everyone exclaimed over the presentation, I noticed James watching me with an unreadable expression. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered. "Tell you what? That I'm successful? That I'm respected in my field?" I kept my voice low but firm. "I did tell you, James. You chose not to listen. You chose to make me smaller so you could fit me into your narrative." His face flushed. "That's not fair. I've always supported your work." "No," I corrected quietly. "You've always tolerated my work. There's a difference." Bradley was now loudly proclaiming his long-standing admiration for innovative cuisine. Thomas was discussing his supposed connections to celebrity chefs. Victoria had somehow unearthed a photo of herself at my New York location, which she was showing to Cassandra as proof she'd always been a fan. I allowed myself one small private smile. The evening had been painful, humiliating, and eye-opening, in equal measure. But as I tasted the exquisite chocolate creation before me, a perfect balance of bitter and sweet, just like this moment of vindication, I knew with absolute certainty that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The person who didn't belong at this table wasn't me. It was the version of myself I'd been pretending to be to make James comfortable. After dessert, Robert escorted me to the kitchen while James and his friends waited at the table. The kitchen was a gleaming testament to both tradition and innovation. Copper pots hanging alongside state-of-the-art equipment, young chefs, working with focused intensity beside veteran cooks who'd likely been there for decades. Chef Martinez showed me their redesigned stations that incorporated my waste reduction principles, beaming with pride as he explained how they'd adapted my ideas to their specific needs. Several of the sous chefs asked for photos, treating me with the professional respect I'd earned but had been denied all evening at that table. "Your work is changing how we think about sustainability in high-end dining," a young female line cook told me earnestly. "I applied here specifically because they adopted your practices." This was my world, a place where my ideas mattered, where I was valued for my contributions rather than judged for my background. The contrast between the kitchen's genuine warmth and the dining room's superficial acceptance couldn't have been starker. When I returned to the table, James and his friends were standing awkwardly, clearly ready to leave. Bradley and Thomas suddenly seemed eager to discuss future business opportunities, pressing business cards into my hand. Cassandra insisted we do lunch sometime, while Victoria asked if I could help her secure a reservation at my New York location for her upcoming birthday. Their transparent attempts to establish connections now that they knew my professional standing made me feel oddly detached, as if observing strangers through glass. I accepted their cards with polite smiles, knowing I'd never call. Outside the restaurant, Bradley and Cassandra made hasty excuses about their babysitter, while Thomas claimed an early meeting. Victoria lingered just long enough to follow me on Instagram before they all disappeared into waiting Ubers, leaving James and me standing alone on the sidewalk. The ride home began in tense silence. Chicago's lights blurred outside the window as light rain began to fall, matching my mood. James finally spoke as we hit a red light on Michigan Avenue. "I don't understand why you're upset," he said, fingers tapping the steering wheel. "If anything, tonight ended up being a triumph for you." They were impressed. I turned to study. His profile, the man I thought I'd been falling in love with, now revealed as someone I barely knew. They were impressed by my professional status, I said quietly. Not by me, just like you. His jaw tightened. That's not fair. I've always supported your career. Have you? You introduced me as someone with a small catering business. You laughed when they mocked my background. You sat there while they humiliated me. They were just joking around. That's how they are. You're being too sensitive. Would you have let them joke around if I'd been from their world? If my parents had trust funds and vacation homes? The light turned green, but James remained still, cars honking behind us until he finally accelerated. Look, he said, voice hardening. I brought you into my circle. I introduced you to influential people who could help your business. Most women would be grateful for the opportunities I've given you. The word grateful hit like a physical blow. In his mind, I was indeed a charity case, someone who should feel thankful for his attention, for the chance to orbit his privileged world. Stop the car, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Don't be dramatic, Morgan. It's raining. Stop. The car, James. Something in my tone made him pull over. We were in front of a boutique hotel, its awning glowing warmly against the darkening sky. You think I should be grateful, I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. Grateful that you brought me into your circle. But here's what I've realized tonight. I don't want to be in your circle. It's small and mean and empty. You're overreacting, he said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Bradley's family has connections that could help your restaurants expand. Thomas's investment firm could. I don't need their connections. I don't need their investments. And I don't need a boyfriend who thinks I should be grateful for being treated like an exhibit at a cultural diversity museum. His expression hardened. Fine. Go cool off. Call me when you're thinking rationally again. I am thinking rationally. For the first time tonight, I'm seeing everything clearly. I reached for the door handle. Don't call me, James. We're done. Over one dinner? One misunderstanding? He laughed incredulously. Come on, Morgan. Where are you going to go? It's pouring now. I stepped out into the rain, feeling the first heavy drops against my face. I built a restaurant empire from nothing. I think I can manage to find my way home from Michigan Avenue. Before he could respond, I closed the door and walked away. The rain soaked through my expensive dress, plastered my carefully styled hair to my face, and ruined my makeup. But with each step, I felt lighter, as if shedding a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. I ducked under the hotel awning and called my best friend Alicia. She answered on the second ring. Hey, restaurant mogul, how was the fancy dinner with the trust fund babies? My laugh dissolved into a sob. Can you come get me? 20 minutes. Later, I was in Alicia's car, wrapped in the emergency sweater she kept in her trunk, recounting the evening through alternating tears and bursts of indignant anger. What a jackass! Alicia fumed as we pulled up to my apartment. And his friends? Sound like extras from a bad 1980s movie about rich jerks. Inside, I changed into sweatpants and an old t-shirt while Alicia made tea, her presence a balm to my wounded pride. We stayed up until 3 a.m., dissecting every moment of the evening, her outrage gradually helping transform my hurt into clarity. You know what bothers me most? I said, clutching my mug. Not their snobbery. I've dealt with that before. It's that James knew who I was, what I've accomplished, and he deliberately minimized it. He was embarrassed by my background, but also threatened by my success. Alicia nodded. Men like that want to be the hero in their own story. Your self-made success didn't fit his narrative of rescuing the girl from the wrong side of the tracks. I slept fitfully, dreams filled with mocking laughter and endless tables where I couldn't find my place. But morning brought a strange sense of peace. As sunlight streamed through my bedroom window, I realized I hadn't just lost a boyfriend. I'd found myself again. James called 11 times that day. I let each call go to voicemail, his messages evolving from confused to angry to apologetic as the hours passed. By evening, flowers arrived, expensive, elaborate arrangements with cards claiming misunderstanding and begging forgiveness. I donated the flowers to a nearby nursing home and blocked his number. The following days brought clarity through distance. I recognized how I'd been slowly compromising myself, softening my opinions, downplaying my achievements, editing my life story to fit more comfortably into James's world. I'd been erasing parts of myself to be more acceptable to people who would never truly see me. Never again, I promised myself as I walked into my restaurant the following Monday, greeting my staff with renewed appreciation for the genuine respect in their eyes. This was where I belonged, not as someone's project or accessory, but as myself, unapologetically whole. 6 months passed like a deep, cleansing breath. Fall turned to winter, winter melted into spring, and with each passing day, the memory of that disastrous dinner became less painful and more instructive. Hayes Restaurant Group opened its 6th location in Miami, a sun-drenched space overlooking the ocean that paid homage to my grandmother's legacy with traditional recipes reimagined through a modern lens. The opening night was a triumph, with lines around the block and a review in the Miami Herald that called it a soulful addition to the city's culinary landscape. I channeled the hurt from that night at Lumiere into creative new directions, a menu section called Humble Beginnings that elevated simple working-class dishes into sophisticated culinary experiences without sacrificing their essence. My mother's favorite macaroni and cheese, enhanced with black truffle and 3 artisanal cheeses, became our most requested dish. The irony wasn't lost on me that the very background Bradley and his friends had mocked was now the authentic foundation that critics and diners celebrated. In trying to make me feel small, they'd inadvertently reminded me of my greatest strength, the genuine connection to food as sustenance, comfort, and community. With my business thriving, I focused on giving back. We launched a culinary training program for disadvantaged youth, providing skills, mentorship, and job placement in top restaurants across the country. Twice a month, I taught classes myself, recognizing in many students the same hunger for opportunity that had driven me. My mom works 3 jobs, a 17-year-old named Marcus told me during one session. She thinks cooking is just a hobby, not a real career. I showed him articles about our restaurant group, the awards, the business success. Tell her that passion combined with hard work can take you anywhere. Never let anyone define your potential by your starting point. The by the eye. Words were as much for me as for him, a mantra I'd learned to live by again. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, as I was reviewing plans for our next location, my assistant mentioned a visitor. Robert, the waiter from Lumiere, had stopped by. Curious, I invited him into my office. "Ms. Hayes," he greeted me warmly. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all. And please, call me Morgan." He smiled, settling into the chair across from me. "I wanted to let you know I've accepted a position as dining room manager at the Four Seasons. After 20 years at Lumiere, it was time for a change." "Congratulations. That's a prestigious role." "Thank you." He hesitated before continuing. "I also wanted to tell you something. That night, when you dined with those people. After you left, I overheard them. The things they said about you before they knew who you were. It was appalling. I felt an old twinge of hurt, quickly replaced by gratitude for his kindness. Thank you for your professionalism that night. You changed the course of my life in a way. I've served thousands of guests over my career," Robert said thoughtfully. "I've learned to recognize true quality, in food and in people. What struck me most wasn't your professional success, impressive as it is. It was how you treated our staff with respect even while enduring disrespect yourself." His words touched something deep within me. My mother worked in service her entire life. I know what it's like to be treated as invisible. That's what I wanted to tell you. That dinner, as uncomfortable as it must have been, inspired me. Watching you maintain your dignity while they tried to diminish you, it reminded me why character matters more than status. After Robert left, I sat reflecting on how profoundly that painful evening had changed my trajectory. In losing James, I'd reclaimed myself. In facing humiliation, I'd found unshakable confidence in my own worth. The personal growth extended beyond my career. I approached relationships differently now, valuing authenticity over appearance, kindness over status. I'd even started dating again, casually, thoughtfully, with a clear-eyed understanding of what I deserved. Jake, a landscapes architect I'd met when redesigning our Chicago location's outdoor space, appreciated my journey without fetishizing it. On our third date, I watched how he treated the server, with genuine warmth, remembering her name, asking about her studies when she mentioned being in school. That told me more about his character than any resume or bank statement could. As spring blossomed into summer, I received an unexpected email, an invitation to speak at Lumiere's 10th anniversary celebration. Chef Martinez was hosting a series of talks by influential figures in Chicago's culinary scene, and he wanted me to discuss sustainable restaurant practices. The symmetry was too perfect to ignore. 1 year after being mocked at that very restaurant, I would return as an honored speaker. I accepted immediately. The night of the event, I arrived early, taking a moment to stand at the entrance and acknowledge how much had changed in a year. As I watched the staff prepare for the evening, I realized the most profound transformation wasn't in my circumstances, but in my perspective. Success wasn't about impressing people who looked down on you. It was about lifting others while standing firmly in your truth. That painful dinner hadn't just taught me to value myself. It had reminded me why I started this journey in the first place. Not for validation from the Bradley Nortons of the world, but to create something meaningful, to honor my grandmother's legacy, to prove that where you begin doesn't determine where you can go. I smoothed down my dress, a custom piece from a young designer from my old neighborhood, and touched my grandmother's pearl necklace for luck. As I walked confidently toward the podium, I silently thanked James and his friends for one of life's most valuable lessons. When people try to make you small, stand tall and refuse to shrink. Have you ever had someone underestimate you only to regret it later? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes our greatest triumphs come after our deepest disappointments. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and self-discovery. Remember, your worth isn't determined by who validates you, but by how true you stay to yourself. Thank you for listening, and may you always find the courage to walk away from tables where you're not valued.